Hello everyone. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. Pankul and I are excited to present to you the power of JSON. I am Leena Bongale, IT Development Manager at TD Bank. I'm located in Toronto, Canada. I am a developer's advocate. What that means is I like going into conferences and make technical presentations on various internet technologies and emerging trends. I like meeting developers and exchange our development journeys and experiences of working on different platforms and technologies. I will share with you the details of my contact at the end of this presentation. So with that, over to Pankal.
Thanks, Leena. Hello, everyone. I am Pankaj Chitrav, and I'm working in TD Bank from last 2 years as a senior software developer. I'm skilled in planning, designing, implementing, debugging applications using Microsoft technologies. I am also skilled in working with DevOps tools like Jenkins, Octopus, Elasticsearch. I'm very passionate about agile way of working and am agile certified practitioner. From last 2 years, I'm working with vendor tool RSA Archer. I'm a lifelong learner and thrive for the challenges and love to learn new things and more advanced technologies. Currently, I'm just diving into machine learning and AI. So let's see where it takes me. And over to Lena.
All right, so let's get into it. What is JSON? JSON is a data representation format and stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is an open standard file format and data interchange format that uses. Just kidding. This is the worst way I could explain to you the power of JSON by putting up a bunch of slides that has definitions and syntax and a whole lot of boring stuff. I mean, our presentation is titled as Power of JSON, not Tutorial of JSON. So now this time, for real, let's get into it and see what makes the star of our show, Mr. JSON, such a powerhouse. From desktops to web to mobile, all computer applications that we use today rely on one of the two principal message formats, JSON and XML. Today, JSON is the most widely used format, despite the fact that it has overtaken XML only within the last 5 years or so. If you do a Google search of JSON versus XML, you will see there are countless number of articles and blog posts where developers are heavily biased towards JSON. This is because of its simplicity and terse semantics. When you read through a lot of developer forums, you will see that more and more developers are criticizing XML, calling it as verbose, inefficient, and an old confusing standard. Well, for now, it does look like the battle between JSON and XML does go to JSON. So, in my mind, if they ever made a movie on the rivalry between JSON and XML, the poster of the movie would be somewhat like this. I know, how very original. And yes, I am a Jason Bourne fan, so we're going to go with that theme in this presentation. JSON has taken over the internet world. Today, when any two applications are communicating with each other across the internet, odds are they're doing it using JSON. All the big players have adopted JSON. Of the 10 most popular web APIs, that's a list consisting of APIs offered by the major players like Google, Facebook, Twitter, you will find that only one API exposes data in XML rather than JSON. To take an illustrative example from that list, Twitter supported XML until 2013 when it released a new version of its API that dropped XML in favor of using JSON exclusively. JSON has also been widely adopted by the programming rank and file. As I mentioned earlier, this is just an introductory session to JSON. It's meant to get you interested in JSON, and you will find plenty of opportunities where you can apply or use JSON in your web-based projects. In this presentation, we will cover the definition and specification of JSON, what JSON looks like in real world, a bit of history of JSON, comparison between relational database and JSON, a brief understanding of when to elect JSON over relational database, XML versus JSON, syntax of JSON, and then we will end with question and answers. JavaScript Object Notation, or in short JSON, is a data interchange format that was introduced in 1999 and became widely adopted in the mid-2000s. Currently, it is the de facto standard for the communication between web services and their clients, that's browsers, mobile applications, etc. Knowing how to read and write, it is an essential skill for any software developer. JavaScript Object Notation is a schema-less, text-based representation of structured data that is based on key value pairs and ordered lists. It is a way to store information in an organized, easy-to-access manner. In a nutshell, it gives us a human-readable collection of data that we can access in a really logical manner. Although JSON is derived from JavaScript, it is supported either natively or through libraries in most major programming languages. JSON is commonly, but not exclusively, used to exchange information between web clients and web servers. To uncover the popularity of JSON over XML, let's for a quick minute go back into the history of web and see how its evolution from Web 1.0 to 2.0 influenced trends in development. The first ever JSON message was sent in April of 2001. Since this was a historically significant moment in the world of computing, it was sent from a computer that was located in a garage. Douglas Crockford and Chip Morningstar, the co-founders of a technology company called State Technologies, had gathered in Morningstar's garage to test out an idea. Crockford and Morningstar were trying to build an Ajax application, and this was long before the word Ajax had even been coined. Browser support for what they were attempting was not good. They were trying to pass data from their application after the initial page load, but they were not finding a way that this would work across all the browsers. Though it's hard to believe today, Internet Explorer did represent the bleeding edge of web browsing back in 2001. As early as in 1999, Internet Explorer 5 supported a pre-module form of XML HTTP requests which developers could use using a framework called ActiveX. Now, Morningstar and Crockford could have used the same technology to fetch data for their application, but this was not going to be worked, or this would not be supported in Netscape 4, another browser. So what they were looking for was for a solution that would be supported on all the browsers. Only a small part of the message resembles JSON as we know it today. The message itself is actually an HTML document containing some JavaScript. The part that resembles JSON is just a JavaScript object literal being passed to a function called receive. In 2002, Crockford bought the domain json.org and put up the JSON grammar and an example implementation of a parser. the website is still up, though it now includes a prominent link to the JSON ECMA standard ratified in 2013. After putting up the website, Crockford did little more to promote JSON, but soon found that lots of people were submitting JSON parser implementations in all sorts of different programming languages. JSON's lineage clearly tied it to JavaScript, but it became apparent that JSON was well suited to data interchange between arbitrary pairs of languages. In keeping with our JSON born movie theme, let's now create an object that we can access using the variable JSON. By enclosing the variable's values in curly braces, we are indicating that the value is an object. Inside the object, we can declare any number of properties using a name-value pairing, separated by commas. We can simply refer to the name of the property we need. For instance, to access information about our friend Jason Bourne, we could use the following snippet. A slightly more complicated example involves storing two people in one variable. To do this, we enclose multiple objects in square brackets, which signifies an array. For instance, if I need to include information about Jason and his brother in one variable, I might use the following. In order to access information from the array that we just created, we need to access the array index of the person we wish to access. For example, we would use this snippet to access information from the variable family. A quick note here, this is beneficial if it will be necessary to loop through stored information, as it lends itself to a for loop with an automatically incrementing value. Another way to store multiple people in our variable would be to do nested objects. To do this, we would create something similar to this code snippet. The reason we do this is because accessing information in nested objects is a little easier to understand. To access information from the nested object that we just created, we would be using a code very similar to this. Nested JSON objects and arrays can be combined as needed to store as much data as necessary. Now here's a million-dollar question: when to use JSON? If you're writing software that communicates between a browser or native mobile application, you should use JSON as the data format. Using a format like XML is an out-of-date choice and a clear red flag. In the case of server-to-server communication, you might be better off using a serialization framework like Apache Avro or Apache Thrift. JSON isn't a bad choice here and still might be exactly what you need, but the answer isn't as clear as for web and mobile applications. If you're using NoSQL databases, you're pretty much stuck with whatever the database gives you. In relational databases that support JSON as a type, a good rule of thumb is to use it as little as possible. Relational databases have been turned for structured data that fits a particular schema. While most now support more flexible data in the form of JSON, you can expect a performance hit when querying for properties within those JSON objects. JSON is the ubiquitous de facto format for sending data between web servers and browsers and mobile applications. It's a simple design and flexibility that makes it easy to read and understand, and in most cases, easy to manipulate in the programming language of your choice. The lack of a strict schema enables flexibility of the format, and that flexibility sometimes makes it difficult to ensure that you're reading and writing JSON properly. So these were my few tips. I hope that helps you when you have to make a decision when to use JSON. Now, before Pankaj gives you a walkthrough of our real life example of where we uniquely used JSON very recently, I will give you a background of the requirement. A few months ago, The project manager of our enterprise infrastructure project came to me with this requirement. They wanted us to publish data mart data into our vendor tool. Our vendor tool is a GRC tool by RSA. The name of their tool is Archer. So the requirement was data from the enterprise data mart had to be displayed on dashboards within Archer. The purpose of this data is mainly for business analytics. So the data would be presented in forms of charts and dashboard, which would be presented to the executives. So the demonstration that Pankul will do or take you a little bit more in depth of that is how we use JSON to pull in this information and show it in Archer. So Pankul, over to you now.
Thanks, Lena. So I'm sure you have got a basic understanding about JSON and JSON architecture. Now moving forward, I will explain what our requirement was and why we chose JSON and how did we leverage JSON and what was the end result. When you see this diagram, you will feel that, oh, it's very straightforward and simple diagram, and this requirement can be done easily. However, when we started working on it, we came to know that communication is a vital key in this requirement. Communication in technical word needs to happen among countless systems, servers, and network. So our requirement was to create and provide report to our senior executive team. And this report contained very crucial data pertaining to risk and risk assessment. The main challenge was that this report had to be viewed in the vendor tool. Now, I'm sure most of you must have worked on vendor tools, and they must be knowing that there are few challenges when we work with vendor tools. And one of the most important challenges is access to the data. So in our case, it was the same. But in the requirement reports, the data was in our external system, external database. And for us, it was necessary to connect with the web services of vendor tool and then create the report. So in short, it was like we connect our SQL to web API through JSON, and then we map the fields. So the approach which we took was that we will have to create a connector, SQL connector through JSON, which will be connecting to our web API, and then we will map the fields, and those fields will then bring data to our report and to our charts. So let's see how we did it, and also why we thought of JSON. Like the second approach could have been XML for us, but we were not very keen to proceed with XML, and the reason was, as you can see here, XML had starting and ending nodes, and it also had starting and ending tags. And when a user wants to read, or when as a developer, when I want to develop the XML node, it was a bit complex. Whereas in JSON, if you see, it's a very simple and readable. I just have to map, and it doesn't have any tags like starting tag or end tag, and it looks very pretty clean and clear and understandable. So that was one of the reason. And second reason was that JSON is a very lightweight. So in performance way, as we needed reports for our charts, there were lots of records expected, and JSON was the best option for us. So we started with JSON. So here you can see that we started by creating a connection, and we used Fiddler here to connect to API, and to that API we created SQL connection, and our SQL connection had a property like of connection string and also the table name, and this table name and column type were the primary component for us to connect to the web services. And when we created this connection, what it did was that afterwards we mapped the fields, and through those fields we were able to get data from API and connected with the SQL. So in short, we had a table in SQL, and we had a couple of columns there. We took those columns and connection string and configured it in web API using JSON. And once that data was inserted in web API, we were able to pull those data to create the report and chart. So the main concept was the connection string, as if there was any issues in connection string, the JSON will be unable to connect API and SQL database. So the next step for us was to map the fields, and here it was like the fields which were present in our external database and the fields which were there in our vendor tool. So we had to map them. So the name of the both the fields in external database and in our vendor tool were same, but we have to map the field ID. So we created a JSON again for the same, and here you can see example like we had a field name called app code, and the Archer ID was 21811, and we mapped it with our JSON to the web services, and the web service connected that with the vendor tool database. So what happened was that once we were able to connect and map the fields and the database with the web API, so the user, whenever inserted the data in the external database, those data got pulled in the web services, and from there we were able to get the charts and reports created for us. So if you see, like let's give me an example, like if we added some field called app code, I added a new app code. So that app code at a runtime was refreshed, and we were able to see that app code in our report and chart. So the basic requirement by our senior executive was to see the runtime data was achieved by using JSON and connecting external SQL database to the web service of the vendor tool. So let me go ahead and show you the outcome we output. Sorry. So here you can see that we were able to create charts, and here if you see the data like 20, 40, 60, and the risk rating, high, low risk, these all are coming from external database. This is a donut chart which we were able to create. Again, the data is from external database, and from external database we are able to pull this chart and create it in our vendor tool. So this is the third type of chart, heat map chart, And in this also, all the data is runtime data. Like if I go and change proactive to 3, and I just refresh the page and I will get it 3. So that is the beauty of JSON. And you can create a couple of more charts or reports, but our requirement for these 3, so we just did these 3. But yes, you can do other reports and other charts using the JSON. I hope you are able to understand like what the JSON can do, and how it can interconnect the data and can transfer the data from one component to the another, and how it can make our communication very easy. So I hope you like our presentation, and back to Lena.
So this brings us to the end of our presentation. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and found it informative, and hope we got your interest piqued enough in JSON for you to do further research and think about using it in your next web development project. If you would like to contact us and share with us your JSON journeys and have any questions on JSON, we would love to hear from you. So until next time, goodbye and take care, be safe.
Thank you everyone. Hope you liked our presentation and we'll definitely meet again. Goodbye, stay safe.